All right, so today we're diving into something that I think a lot of people maybe don't think about on a day-to-day basis, but it's really kind of fascinating when you start peeling back the layers.
Yeah.
And it's this whole world of supply chains, Like we interact with so many different products every single day.
Oh, yeah.
And each of those products has this incredibly complex journey to get to us. It's like,
Absolutely.
I was just thinking about my phone the other day. And
Yeah.
just had like all the different components, all the different materials, all the different countries probably that were involved in making this one little device that's, in my pocket right now. It's kind of mind-boggling.
Well, and you think about like even something as simple as like you go to the grocery store and you pick up a bar of soap.
Right.
Like you wouldn't think that there's this huge amount of information that has to be tracked and managed just to get that bar of soap onto the shelf.
Totally.
But there is, it's like you've got the supplier, you've got the weight, you've got the dimensions, you've got the, where it's stored, how it's packaged. Lead times, exactly. And all of that has to be like precisely coordinated to make sure that that bar of soap is there when you want to buy it.
And the craziest thing I think is like you can have 2 bars of soap that look absolutely identical to you and me.
Right.
But if one of them is like a fraction of an ounce heavier, it might actually need a completely separate part number in the system.
Yeah.
Just to keep track of everything. It's crazy.
Absolutely. And that's really what we're talking about here. It's this kind of data explosion that comes with managing all these physical parts. And it's a huge challenge for organizations, especially when you consider that they're under constant pressure to, reduce costs and become more efficient.
Yeah, it's like they're being squeezed from both sides, right? They've got this increasing complexity of the supply chain.
Right.
And then they've got this need to like streamline everything and make it as lean as possible.
Yeah, exactly. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape while you're trying to put it together.
70%. And that's where this concept of plan for every part, or PFEP, comes in. It's like it's like a framework. It's a system that's designed to bring some order to this kind of potential chaos.
It is. It's a way to kind of get a handle on all of that data and to make sure that you're making the best possible decisions about how you're managing your materials.
So with this deep dive, we're really trying to get to the bottom of like, what exactly is PFEP? How does it actually work in practice?
Yeah.
And why is it becoming so important for companies that are dealing with these really complex supply chains?
Exactly. And the sources that we've been looking at, they really go into a lot of detail about this methodology.
They do. They're very thorough. So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
When we talk about PFEP, what are we actually talking about? Like, what is this thing?
So PFEP at its core is basically a really well-organized database.
Okay.
Think of it like a central hub where you keep all the critical information about every single part in your entire supply chain.
Like every single nut and bolt and screw.
Every single one, yeah, from the raw materials that come in the door all the way to the finished product that goes out to the customer.
Wow.
Everything in between.
Okay, so it's not just like a spreadsheet or
No.
a couple of documents. It's like
This is like a comprehensive system that's designed to track everything and to make sure that you have all the information you need at your fingertips.
So traditionally, how would companies have managed this kind of information before we had these, sophisticated databases and systems?
Well, back in the day, it would have been a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of like, paper files, maybe some like basic databases like Access or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was very manual, very prone to errors. And, as supply chains have gotten more complex, it's just become completely unmanageable to do that way.
Right. So now we're talking about integrating this into like full-blown ERP systems.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to have this information integrated into your core systems so that it's accessible to everyone who needs it and so that you can automate a lot of the processes.
That makes sense. So when we're talking about this PFE database, what kind of information are we actually tracking for each part?
So there's a core set of attributes that you would typically track for every part. And it starts with the basics, like the part number and a clear description of what the part is.
Okay.
But then you get into things like the dimensions of the part. So the length, the width, the height, the weight, how it's packaged, all of that kind of stuff.
Got it.
And then really importantly, you need to track the supplier information. So who's providing this part to you?
So you know exactly where it's coming from.
Exactly. And you can start to build up a picture of like, the reliability of that supplier, their lead times, their capabilities, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. That's a lot of information already, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, there's more.
What else is there? What are some of the other critical data points?
Well, you need to have some forecasting data, so you need to be able to predict how much of this part you're going to need in the future
Right.
so that you can plan accordingly. You also need to have some kind of inventory classification system. So this is where you might use things like ABC analysis,
Oh.
which categorizes parts based on their value, or XYZ analysis, which looks at the variability of demand.
So you're not treating every single part the same way.
Exactly. You're prioritizing the parts that are most important to your business.
That makes sense.
And then you've got things like lead times.
Ah, yeah, those are crucial.
Those are huge. So you need to know how long it takes to manufacture the part, how long it takes to purchase it, how long it takes to inspect it when it comes in.
Yeah, because any delay in any one of those steps can have a ripple effect through the whole system.
Absolutely. It can completely throw off your production schedule.
Right. And then what about the actual quantities? Like how much do we need and where do we keep it?
Yeah, so you would specify the standard order quantity for each part.
Okay.
So that's like, how many do you order at a time to kind of optimize your purchasing and your storage costs?
Got it.
And then you also need to define the safety stock level.
Safety stock. So that's like the buffer?
Exactly. It's like your emergency fund for parts.
I like that.
Just in case there's a sudden surge in demand or a supplier delay, you've got a little bit of extra on hand to keep things running smoothly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So is this PFEP system, is it like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, or can companies customize it to their own specific needs?
No, it's actually very flexible. You can adapt it to fit your specific industry, your specific business processes.
Okay.
So you might have some additional attributes that you want to track that aren't part of that core set.
Right, like if you're a clothing manufacturer, maybe you want to track the color of the fabric.
Exactly. Or if you're a food manufacturer, maybe you want to track the expiration date of the ingredients.
Right, it's all about making sure that you're capturing the information that is actually valuable to you.
Exactly. And that's really the power of PFEP. It's about making all of this data visible and actionable.
Okay, so you're not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data. You're actually using it to make better decisions.
Right. And when you have all this information in one central location, it really opens up a lot of possibilities. You can track your supplier performance, you can manage your production schedules more effectively, you can handle part revisions more smoothly, and you can get a much clearer picture of how your supply chain is actually performing.
So it's really about bringing that transparency and that visibility to the whole process.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's tie this back to lean manufacturing.
Okay.
How does PFE fit into that whole philosophy?
So PFEP is really a foundational element of lean manufacturing. It's all about having a plan for every single component so that you can optimize your material flow and eliminate waste.
Okay.
And, one of the things that our sources pointed out is that a lot of companies have made great strides in areas like value stream mapping and setting up continuous flow cells.
Right.
But they often struggle to maintain a steady output because they don't have a good system for handling purchased parts.
That makes sense.
And that's where PFEP comes in. It provides that missing link.
Okay, so it's really about connecting all the dots
Exactly.
and making sure that the materials are flowing smoothly from start to finish.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that there are some real-world examples of companies that are using PFEP successfully.
Right.
Let's dive into those. I'm really curious to see how this actually plays out in practice.
Okay, so first up we have Toyota, which is kind of the gold standard when it comes to lean manufacturing.
Of course.
And they use PFEP extensively in their just-in-time system.
JIT.
Yeah, so they track lead times very carefully. They track storage requirements, they track usage patterns, and all of this data allows them to keep their inventory levels incredibly lean.
Okay.
Which saves them a ton of money in warehousing costs, and it also helps them to avoid shortages and delays.
So they're really walking that tightrope between having enough inventory to meet demand.
Yeah.
But not so much that they're, bleeding money on storage costs.
Exactly. They've got it down to a science.
It's impressive.
It is.
Okay, so what about another example?
Well, Caterpillar Inc. is another company that has seen great results with PFEP.
Okay, what do they do?
So they implemented PFEP with a focus on improving supply chain visibility and reducing material handling inefficiencies.
Okay.
So they standardized their part classification system and they automated a lot of their procurement decisions based on the data in their PFE system. And this allowed them to significantly reduce their cycle times and optimize their inventory levels.
So they're getting things done faster. They're not wasting as much time and money on moving things around or storing things that they don't need.
Exactly. They're making their operations much more efficient.
Okay, that's really interesting. So what about an example from a different industry?
Well, let's look at Boeing.
Okay.
So they operate in the aerospace industry, which is notoriously complex.
Yeah, lots of moving parts, literally and figuratively.
Exactly. And for Boeing, PFEP is all about managing that complexity. They have a huge number of suppliers, they have very specialized parts,
Right.
and they need to make sure that everything is flowing smoothly to avoid any disruptions to their production schedule.
I can imagine.
So they use PFEP to track supplier details, packaging standards, logistics data, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And this helps them to minimize shortages and improve their overall scheduling.
So even in a really complex industry like aerospace, PFEP can make a big difference.
It can really help to bring some order to the chaos.
That's great. All right. So what about some companies that are actually in the business of providing PFEP solutions?
Okay, well, there's PropPlanner.
Okay.
And they're interesting because they actually implemented PFEP in their own operations.
Right.
And they saw some really impressive results.
Like what?
Well, they reported a 66% reduction in their replenishment cycle times.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. And they also saw an 84% decrease in their line-side inventory.
So they're freeing up a lot of space.
Yeah, and they're also reducing the risk of parts becoming obsolete or damaged.
Right.
And on top of that, they saw a 98% reduction in parts shortages.
That's almost unbelievable.
It's pretty remarkable, and it really shows the power of PFEP when it's implemented effectively.
Yeah, those are some serious results. Okay, so one last example. What about Tata Consultancy Services?
Yeah, so TCF, they're a global IT services company,
Okay.
and they used PFEP to optimize their inventory and reduce costs associated with things like wastage damage and obsolescence.
So they're really focusing on the financial benefits of having a well-managed inventory.
Yeah, they're trying to squeeze every bit of value out of their inventory.
That makes sense.
And PFEP helps them to do that.
Okay, so we've seen some really compelling examples of how PFEP can be used across a variety of industries. But let's say someone is listening to this and they're thinking, okay, this sounds great, but how do we actually implement this in our own organization?
Right.
What are some of the key steps that they need to take?
Well, first of all, you need to choose the right database or system.
Okay.
You need something that can handle the volume of data that you're going to be collecting.
Right.
And you also need something that's user-friendly and accessible to all the relevant stakeholders.
So it can't be something that only the IT department knows how to use.
Exactly. It needs to be something that everyone can use and understand.
Okay, so once you got the system in place, what's next?
Well, you need to define what data is actually critical for your business.
Okay.
Don't try to track everything under the sun. Just focus on the data points that are actually going to help you make better decisions.
So it's about being strategic.
It is.
And not just, collecting data for the sake of it.
Right.
Okay, what else?
Well, you need to make sure that you have buy-in from all the relevant teams.
Okay.
This can't just be a supply chain initiative. It needs to involve production, sales, logistics, engineering, all the different departments that are going to be impacted by PFEP.
So it's really a company-wide effort.
It is. It's got to be a collaborative effort.
Got it. And then once the system is up and running, how do you make sure that it stays accurate and up to date?
Well, you need to assign clear roles and responsibilities.
Okay.
So someone needs to be in charge of maintaining the PFEP data. Someone needs to be in charge of approving any changes or updates.
Right.
And you also need to establish a regular review process to make sure that the data is still accurate and relevant.
Yeah, it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
No, it's an ongoing process. You need to be constantly monitoring and updating the data.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's recap. What are the main benefits that companies can expect to see if they implement PFEP successfully?
Well, you're going to get much better supply chain visibility.
Okay.
You're going to be able to reduce your cycle times. You're going to improve your inventory accuracy. You're going to have better coordination between departments and suppliers. And you're going to be able to optimize your procurement and logistics planning.
So it's really about making the whole supply chain run more smoothly and efficiently.
Exactly.
Okay, but what about the challenges? Are there any potential pitfalls that companies should be aware of?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is dealing with incomplete or inaccurate data.
Okay.
If you're working with bad data, you're going to make bad decisions.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So you need to make sure that you have a good system in place for collecting and validating the data.
Right.
Another challenge is poor communication.
Okay.
If different departments aren't talking to each other and keeping each other updated on changes, then the PFEP system is going to become outdated very quickly.
Right. So it's really important to have that open communication and that shared understanding of how the system works.
Absolutely. And then the final challenge is a lack of review processes.
Okay.
If you're not regularly reviewing the data and making sure that it's still accurate, then you're going to run into problems.
So it's all about being proactive and staying on top of things.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like PFEP is a really powerful tool for companies that are looking to improve their supply chain efficiency.
It is. It's a very valuable methodology.
And we've seen how it can be used successfully by companies of all sizes and in all industries.
Right.
But it's not a magic bullet.
No.
It takes effort and commitment to make it work.
It does, but the payoff can be huge.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. I've learned a lot about PFEP, and I think our listeners will too.
I hope so.
And, one thing that I keep coming back to is this idea that PFEP is all about paying attention to the details.
Yeah.
It's about understanding every single step in the process and making sure that everything is planned and tracked meticulously.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really valuable lesson for any business, no matter what industry you're in or what size you are.
I agree.
It's those little details that can often make the biggest difference.
They can.
So as you're listening to this, think about what areas of your own business could benefit from a more detailed and structured approach.
Mm-hmm.
What processes could be improved? What data could you be tracking more effectively?
Right.
Food for thought.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of PFEP.
My pleasure.
Until next time.
See you then.